my Maryland State Archivist and Secretary of the State House Trust. On behalf of the Trust, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the Maryland State House. I'd like to acknowledge the presence of a distinguished former chair of the State House Trust, Governor Paris Glendening. We are pleased to have several elected officials joining us today who will be recognized at the reception to follow. Today's event is co-hosted by the MD-250 Commission, a commission whose members have been appointed by executive order to plan for Maryland's commemoration of America's 250th anniversary of the events of the Revolutionary War, which commenced with the Declaration of Independence in 1776. Governor Glendening is serving as chair of MD-250, along with First Lady Judge Katie O'Malley, who is serving as vice chair. It is fitting that we gather here in the oldest state house still in continuous legislative use and a National Historic Landmark, to look back, to look ahead, and remember a very important visitor to this building in June of 1874. But before we revisit that day, let us look even further back to the time before this building stood, when the land we are on today was the homeland of the Piscataway and Susquehannock peoples, who held and still hold the land and waterways of the Chesapeake Bay region as sacred. The lives of these indigenous people were upended forever by the arrival of the colonists, who themselves were guided by the desire to find a homeland on which to build their future while being free to pursue their own beliefs. For almost a century and a half, Maryland was ruled from afar by the Lords Baltimore, whose portraits surround you, while the colony's population and its economy grew, an economy built on the enslaved labor of many among that population. The capital moved from St. Mary's City to Annapolis, and it was here that the people of Maryland joined the other 12 colonies to overthrow foreign rule and create their own form of government. And in the same years that war was being waged to claim independence for Americans, the bricks that comprised these walls were being shaped and forged and carried by enslaved people to construct this building, a building in which they themselves had no representation nor rights to occupy. The final acts of that Revolutionary War took place here in this building when Congress convened in the then new Senate chamber and General George Washington resigned his commission as Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army on December 23, 1783. 3 weeks later, in that same room, the Treaty of Paris was ratified, officially ending the war and making this building the first peacetime capital of the new United States of America. It would not be for another 100 years after another war was fought, this one against each other, that all Americans could freely enter this state house. And that was only after another historic act occurred in this building. On November 1st, 1864, when slavery, the laws for which were codified in Maryland only a few years after arrival of those first colonists, was finally and forever abolished in the state. 10 years later, on June 13, 1874, Frederick Douglass came to this building for the first time as a free man. Born Frederick Bailey in 1818, the only record of his birth being his name in a ledger listing property. He was enslaved on the Eastern Shore and grew up in the same place where the tree that would eventually provide the wood for this lecture was already a mature white oak. As Frederick grew, he recognized the injustice of the world in which he found himself, and it was from the port of Baltimore, such as it was in 1838, that he fled to his own freedom and became an internationally known speaker, author, and advocate for the abolition of slavery and the rights of all people to pursue life, liberty, and happiness. When he traveled to Annapolis that June, he was newly appointed as president of the Freedmen's Bank in Washington and witnessing a national debate in Congress about the passage of a civil rights bill. During his visit, he spent time with the members of the African Methodist Episcopal Church, which would soon purchase the land to build Mount Moriah, where we will gather later this morning. But he also took time to come into this building and to visit the Senate chamber, where he encountered the monumental painting you see behind me, commissioned 16 years earlier in honor of the 75th anniversary of Washington's resignation.
And this was recently General Washington and his President Army. We shall be well to remember the words of General Washington as he willingly and peacefully gave up the reins of his immense power to the civilian government. I am here with unusual diffidence to quote the words of General George Washington. Mr. President, the great events on which my resignation depended, having at length taken place, I have now the honor of offering my sincere congratulations to Congress and of presenting myself before them to surrender into their hands the trust committed to me, and to claim the indulgence of retiring from the service of my country, happy in the confirmation of our independence and sovereignty, and pleased with the opportunity afforded the United States of becoming a respectable nation. I resigned with satisfaction the appointment I accepted with diffidence. A diffidence in my abilities to accomplish so arduous a task, which, however, was superseded by the confidence in the rectitude of our cause, the subject of the supreme power of the Union, and the patronage of heaven. The successful termination of the war was verified to the most sanguine expectations, and my gratitude for the imposition of providence and the assistance I have received from my countrymen increases with every review of the momentous contest. While I repeat my obligations to the Army in general, I should do injustice to my own feelings not to acknowledge in this place the peculiar services of the distinguished merits of the gentlemen who have acted to my person during the war. It was impossible the choice of confidential officers to compose my family should have been more fortunate. Permit me, sir, to recommend in particular those who have continued in service to the present moment as worthy of the favorable notice and patronage of Congress. I consider it an indispensable duty to close this last solemn act of my official life by commending the interest of our dearest country to the protection of the Almighty God, and those who have superintended of them to his holy keeping. Having now finished the work assigned me, I retire from the great theater of action and in bidding an affectionate farewell to this august body. Under those orders I have so long acted, I here offer my commission and take my leave of all the employments of public life. End quote. The year is 1874. I left the state of Maryland more than a quarter century ago. The platform which I stand today and the distance to Talbot County, where I was born, is considerable. And the difficulty in getting from the former to the latter is by no means slight. I have sometimes seen myself referred to as an orator, but for the life of me, I cannot tell why that reputation is accorded me. I have excited some in years past in the telling of a simple story of human bondage, such as 1,000 other colored Maryland boys could have told with equal skill and effect. One would think if I could make a speech, I could do it right here in this state building. But you have called me to speak, and I have obeyed your call. Maryland is now a glorious free state. The return of the dove to the ark with a leaf was a sure sign that the bitter waters of slavery had subsided. My coming among you is a sign that the bitter waters of slavery has subsided. I have some remarks here that were prepared, and I just wanted to somewhat speak on this particular occasion as we recall what I did here in 1874. Less than 10 years ago, the state of Maryland still worshiped the altar of slavery. The happiest moment in my life was the announcement of the Emancipation Proclamation on the first day of January, 1863, when the whole world waited to see if Abraham Lincoln would prove to be as good as his word. However, right here in Maryland, slavery wasn't abolished until November 1st of 1864, when our third state constitution went into effect. In Texas, 9 years ago, this week, nearly 2 years after President Abraham Lincoln emancipated slaves, Africans in Confederate states, Union troops arrived in Galveston Bay, Texas, with the news of freedom, 7 months after Maryland abolished slavery. Juneteenth, or Jubilee as we called it, celebrates the long displayed history of justice. But it certainly wasn't just delayed in Texas. We faced bigotry and the lack of civil rights, but the Civil War was a turning point that we must remember. The eloquence of the most gifted orator of our country would fail and fitly and fully illustrate the heroic deeds and the virtues of the brave men who volunteered, fought, and fell for the cause of the Union and freedom. That's including my sons, Charles and Louis, who fought in the 54th Regiment. For no greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. The topmost height of this greatness was touched by those who in our national extremity nobly died for our republic. Let us have peace. Yes, let us have peace. But let us have liberty. Let us have law. Let us have justice. Let us have the Constitution with this 13th Amendment and the 14th Amendment and the 15th Amendment. The American people will, in any great emergency, be true to themselves. The heart of the nation is still sound and strong. And in this past, so in the future, patriotic millions are capable captains to lead themselves and will stand as a wall of fire around the republic and to end and see liberty and equality and justice triumph. We are all here today to celebrate this moment. And at this particular point, we might all visit the very spot where General Washington committed himself to civil service peacefully and willingly to give his immense power to civilian government. Thank you so much.
Thank you.